Recovery coaching is a form of strengths-based support for people with addictions or in recovery from alcohol or other drugs, codependency or other addictive behaviors. So in our case, we're talking gambling harms, addictive gambling, gambling disorder. There are multiple models with some programs using self-identified peers who draw from their own lived experience with substance use and recovery, and some utilizing people who have no lived experience but some training and support depending on local standards and availability. Recovery coaches do not offer primary treatment for addiction, do not diagnose, and are not associated with any particular method or means of recovery. They support any positive change, helping persons coming home from treatment to avoid relapse, build community support for recovery, or work on life goals not related to addiction, such as relationships, work, or education. And that's simply from, as I say, from Wikipedia. I think from our own experience, the one thing we would say about recovery is so much of addiction lies within one's own head. So much of addiction is a battle that you have to fight yourself internally, and therefore sometimes you get to the point where you can no longer trust. You feel you can no longer trust what your brain is telling you, what your mind is telling you, and it's for that reason where I think, apart from anything else, having somebody with lived experience to walk alongside you, to be a sounding board, to give objective views can be very important as well. I think a lot of people probably get challenged by the idea that they have ideations or thoughts which they can no longer trust as being in their best interests. So I think simply having an objective view, somebody who understands where you've been and is there alongside you, can be very powerful as well in the context of this. But what I will do is I will hand over to, well, introduce our, if you want, our star speaker of the night, who is Steve Girling. Steve is the co-founder, along with his wife Rochelle, of Reframe Coaching. Steve has his own personal gambling issues, as we all have, and if you want, Reframe Coaching came out of his need to do something to recover for himself, and also when he could see the need for new and innovative ways of supporting people into recovery that simply weren't really there when he was looking around. And I think that's the story of so much innovation within the sector. People tend to start organizations and support different forms of sports simply because when they look, it's not there and they see there's a need for it. So what we'll do, without any further ado, is I'll hand over to Steve. And Steve, thank you very much for being here, and you have control.
Thanks, Mark. And yeah, thank you for inviting me, and really good to be here with everyone this evening. I'm just going to share my screen just because I've got some slides. So hopefully everybody can see the intro slide, talking gambling and recovery coaching.
Yeah, sounds
cool. Brilliant. Thank you. I can't see you, so thank you for confirming, David. Much appreciated. So as Mark very kindly introduced myself, and thank you for that, Mark. So I am the co-founder of Reframe Coaching. I'm also in the 7th year of my own recovery from a gambling addiction, which I'm going to touch on a little bit in a little bit before leading into the presentation. I'm also a recovery coach professional and a member of the International Association of Recovery Coach Professionals as well. So it's something that I've worked hard towards and really see value in recovery coaching. So I'm going to share some of what that looks like tonight. But if I can, I just want to take you back a step to my own personal recovery. So I reached out to support with the National Gambling Treatment Service, as it was then, now the National Gambling Support Network, and had some treatment with a charity local to me called Break Even, and had some wonderful support. I always speak really highly of the support that I've had from the team at Break Even. Really helped for me to establish a healthier relationship with gambling, and for me that was around abstinence. So really looking at things such as barriers, blockers, also delving into some of the triggers and urges and root causes. I was very conscious that I didn't want to replicate, one harmful behavior with another. So I really wanted to delve into some of that, and the support that I had from Break Even really helped to do so and really build a foundation for my recovery to start. So that was great. However, the one thing that Rochelle and I kept coming back to, Rochelle being my wife, was whilst that was great and really, really, like I said, built that foundation, I was now left with a number of different areas of my life that I'd damaged and neglected because of my gambling. And what we found was now I'd finished my treatment, there was very little in terms of ongoing support to help me bring awareness to help me rebuild, to help me tackle some of those areas. I was very fortunate that I had a really good support network around me that really helped to do some of that stuff. But we kind of thought that actually, there's a missing support network here to help people in the next phase of their recovery. And for me, my next phase of my recovery was spending some time in prison. And whilst I was in prison, the only asset you have is the asset that you probably don't want, or the one that you want to hurry up, which is time. But ultimately, I used that asset to learn. So firstly, build upon that foundation as being in recovery and learn more about me and starting to become more comfortable with some uncomfortable stuff, but also learn in the classroom. And it was there where I'd done a certificate in counselling. I also done a certificate in coaching and really recognized the difference between the two, but also how complementary that they could be for someone. Also done a mentoring award. Again, notice the subtle differences, but similarities as well. And I also done probably one of the most rewarding things that I've done, which was trained to be a Samaritan. And being a Samaritan is all about actively listening. And that was what the scheme was called in prison, the listener scheme. And during that 9 weeks worth of training, it really taught you how to listen to people. And I think for me, that was the first time where I really saw the value in holding space for people, allowing them to feel heard. And all of that really contributed to when I came out of prison. And as Mark said, we really wanted to do something in this space, the gambling recovery space. And it was something that my wife and I had talked long and hard about. And I remember talking about coaching and about how coaching was, again, different to treatment. So it would be complementary to the support services available. And how it really would then support people in this next phase, a phase where we'd experienced and not a lot of support. So ultimately, that's where Reframe Coaching has come from. I'm going to share now a little bit more about what recovery coaching is all about and how we use that within Reframe Coaching. But I wanted to give you that little bit of context at the start as to, the sort of reason why we decided to do it. Like I say, we wanted to complement the support services that were already available. A lot of counselling support. There was also some peer mentoring support, which again, mentoring is very different to coaching. So we wanted to provide another option for people in the next phase of their recovery. Mark's just read out earlier a little bit about what recovery coaching is, and I agree with pretty much most of it. This is what CCAR, a little paragraph about what they say a recovery coach is. So a recovery coach is anyone interested in promoting recovery by removing barriers and obstacles to recovery and by serving as a personal guide for people seeking or in recovery. And for those of you who aren't aware, CCAR is the acronym stands for Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery. Based over in America, they've been delivering recovery coaching support and training since 1998. Trained over 98,000 individuals worldwide and have really been the leader in recovery coaching. So that was who we kind of lent on when it came to actually delivery, looking at standards, looking at support, looking at training. And this is what their definition basically is of recovery coaching. For us as an organization, and Reframe Coaching is a registered charity, we use recovery coaching But we use a unique blend. So we use the lived experience, so that peer element, alongside the recovery coaching to deliver our modality of support. And for us, recovery coaching is based on supporting individuals to help them bring greater awareness to the present. Together, we explore suggestions and solutions, but they're always based on the individual's needs, to help them break down their barriers, but then move towards where they want to get to. And I think it's really important to emphasize the word they, where they want to get to, because coaching is all about working with someone on what their goals are, not what goals we want for them, which could be your more mentoring approach. So this is where we're going to get to. These are the steps we're going to take, and I'm going to show you how to do it, and you follow me and we'll get there. That's very much that mentoring approach. Coaching is very different to that, whereas we want to empower individuals to have choice, to come up with their own solutions, and we support them. And how we support them is by delivering our principles of recovery coaching. So I'm going to take you through what our principles are. So our first principle is actively listening. Second one is all around asking really good and powerful open questions. Third one is about managing our own beliefs and biases as individuals. And the fourth one is all about promoting multiple pathways, both to recovery, but also within recovery as well. I'm just going to touch on them in a little bit more detail. So active listening, and this is what the Samaritans use as their template. So they use this SHUSH acronym, which is all around. So the first one is around show you care, and a lot of this is around having empathy, focusing on the other person, making eye contact when you're listening to someone, putting your phone away, turning your phone off. If you're doing it via Zoom, turning Outlook off so emails aren't bouncing up, that type of thing. The H is all about having patience. It can really, although it's actively listening, it can really sometimes take a little bit of time before someone feels comfortable enough to open up. And this is where that unique blend of lived experience comes in. So, having worked and supporting individuals who really see the power and benefit of someone who's walked on a similar path, someone who stepped in their shoes, really helps this stage, because it can be really difficult to open up for someone. But if you're talking to someone who understands, then that might remove that barrier. But it's really important when you're actively listening to have patience. Give someone that space until they feel comfortable enough to share. No pressure. Use open questions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, so I won't go into too much detail there. The other S is say it back. So really reaffirm what you've heard, which is really important, but also to check that you've understood what is being said. But with saying it back, making sure that you're not as well interrupting someone who's talking, giving them that space, giving them that time, and also not offering a solution. So recovery coaching isn't about fixing people. It's not about providing loads of advice and saying, oh, you need to do this, you must do that. That's not it. And that's not what actively listening is either. And then finally, H is around, having that courage. So sometimes you might listen to individuals talking about their experience, and at times it may come across, and I hate using this word, but it may come across like a negative experience, or maybe we talk about like a fixed mindset. But again, having courage just to listen to that space. Again, sometimes when we're listening to people expressing their vulnerability, it can bring up our own internal stuff as well. Again, I'm going to talk about that in a slide a little bit later about managing that. But also having courage, not having to fill silence. So sometimes people can feel really uncomfortable with silence, but sometimes some of the most powerful pieces of actively listening are when there's nothing being said, and you're just providing that safe space for people to process, people to reflect, people to just bring forward their thoughts as well. So That's that shush acronym around actively listening. I think in short, what we always say is listen to understand, not listen to reply. I think when you're wanting to work with people, it can become, you're doing it with the right intention, but it can become really easy to listen to reply. So you really want to get across your message. You really want to give that piece of advice. You really want to sort of fix that because you want them to get better. Again, like I say, it's done with the right intention, but that's not what active listening is. So hopefully I've explained a little bit more about what that looks like from a recovery coaching context. And one thing that CCAR say is listen and silent have the same letters. So sometimes that silent space, it's what's needed. So that's a little bit about how we use active listening. I wanted to touch on asking open questions. So what are open questions and what do they look like? So I've put a few examples on the screen here, and this is the type of questions, and there are obviously thousands, but these are the type of questions that a coach would be asking someone. So they're ones where you're looking for like that bit more of an explanation. So how can I help you today? Obviously with that emphasis being on help. What support do you need? Describe how you've been. What resources do you need to move forward? What would you like to achieve? Why is this goal important? What obstacles are you facing right now? And finally, what would you like more of in your life? So really questions that hopefully get the person that we're working with thinking about their response, then communicating their response, and again then going back a step of us actively listening to what's being said, also body language, etc., and really starting to maybe ask questions that either that person hasn't thought of, or maybe sometimes that they're actually scared of the answer. So again, building up that rapport, making people feel safe to then explore these questions with people. And again, what we would do, or what a coach would do, is then build upon some of the answers that come from this session. So how can I help you today? Again, we want to offer a really bespoke service, so it's not like this mentoring, we're going from A to C, this is the steps that you take. It's really person-centered, it's really bespoke to how actually we can help. And as Mark said again at the start, recovery is so wide. There's so many different points that obviously all aspects of everyday life recovery fits into. So how can I help you today? Yes, we're together because we're talking about recovery from gambling harms, but we might be talking and supporting about different areas of life. So that's a little bit about the second principle that we use around asking those really powerful opening questions. Our third principle is around promoting multiple pathways, both to and within recovery. We firmly believe as a service, we're not one size fits all. For individuals, there are lots of support, there's lots of resources, there's lots of options available, and individuals in their recovery should be able to get all of the support they need to help them achieve their goal. So if we're working with someone and they want support in a particular area, we will always either signpost to maybe a service or send them a resource, sometimes someone else's resource as well, or we'll refer to onward services. But that's always based on what that individual wants and where they want to get to, and that's always the emphasis. So supporting them with that multiple pathways approach. And then finally is managing beliefs and biases. And this comes from a coach's perspective. So all of us, every human being, we all have our own beliefs. We all have our own belief system. We talk about this in some of our coaching sessions, but they're normally formed within childhood, normally formed within our experiences, and they normally give us our outlook on how we view things and how we see things through our own lens. So we all do have our beliefs, and then of course we all have our biases based on experiences. Now, as a coach and someone with lived experience, and then working with someone, it's really, really important that we're able to manage these, especially if we want to deliver our other two principles. So, beliefs from a coach, it might be, you're working with someone of a certain age, that might bring up a belief, might be of a ethnicity, could be gender, could be appearance. They might well decide that they want to do a recovery method that was different to our own as people with lived experience, and other things such as religion. So there are so many different things that actually sort of formulate that belief system. So it's really important that, like I say, as coaches, we are able to manage that. And some of the stuff, that might well come up, and these are just assumptions that I've made for the presentation. When we're talking around things such as actively listening, if we're working together, and a lot of the work that we do is remote, just straight away, they might look disinterested. They might be really struggling. The person might be really struggling with a topic. It might be even the environment that they're in, that they're actually maybe a little bit nervous, but we might just adopt that. Well, actually, they look really interested. They look really disinterested. If they then decide to, maybe they want to go a certain route for their recovery, as someone with lived experience, and it might be, well, that didn't work for me, so it won't work for you. Again, that's not the type of approach that we would take as a recovery coach. It might be certain things that come up in a session. When it comes to the next session, they're going to be late. And then the assumptions of why that person's late as well. And when you talk about fixing people and some of the biases around, you might hear something and straight away you jump to, they need to do this, they should do that. Or if you've set a goal at the end of a session and then you come to the next session, and for whatever reason, you talk about how did you get on with the goal. If that goal wasn't achieved, jump in again. They aren't committed. Or if someone is sitting there on a call and really adopting that fixed mindset and making that assumption of, well, they must be depressed, and actually diagnosing someone, which again is something that we don't do as recovery coaches. Now, I've used those examples and they're not live examples, but that's all stuff that actually every human being is constantly got these beliefs and biases that pop into their head. So it's really, really important that when we're working as a recovery coach, we step out of our shoes and into the person that we're working with. And what we try and do as a charity is then provide our coaches with some additional support around being able to manage this stuff, because we know it is, again, this recovery coaching is is a skill, it's a qualification that we work really hard at. So we support all of our coaches with additional support. Everyone gets one-to-one case management support. Everyone gets group supervision support as well, where they're able to reflect, to talk about some of the stuff that's coming up for them in this session. It's a way that we want to make our coaches feel, completely safe to deliver the work that, they're doing, because we realize how challenging, it can be working with someone who maybe is adopting a different recovery pathway to yourself, a pathway that you found really challenging, because it brings that up for you as a coach. So it's really important that we as an organization work with our coaches so they feel supported to step into someone else's shoes as well. And we never take that for granted. So that's a little bit about our main principles of recovery coaching. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight into how we deliver it, what it is. I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the benefits that we've seen of recovery coaching. So these are some of the things anecdotally that we've seen since we've started delivery. And one thing I haven't mentioned is we were founded, Reframe Coaching was founded at the end of 2020, with delivery starting in 2021. That was when we delivered our pilot, our Life After Gambling program. lived experience embedded with recovery coaching. We converted to a charity September 2022. And since then, we've really started to increase our delivery one-to-one, and also we do some group delivery as well. At the start of 2023, we partnered with GamCare, treatment provider, and we accept direct referrals when an individual has come towards the end of their treatment episode. So they're individuals who would then like some more one-to-one support. And so these are some of the benefits that we have seen during that time. So it provides the opportunity to speak to someone who understands, who knows and understands how you might be feeling. One thing we do allow with recovery coaching is for our coaches to share their own lived experience if they feel it's going to benefit the person that they're working with. And one of the reasons that we do that is to help promote that compassion, rapport, connection, hope and motivation as well. And in turn, what we've seen that helps to reduce things such as isolation, loneliness, but also shame and stigma. Individuals can see that, what is a daunting and scary path isn't a path that, they're the only ones walking. There are people have walked that before them, and people will continue to walk that alongside them as well. Recovery coaching is not treatment, so we're not a clinical service. Recovery coaching, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, really focuses on the present, so the here and the now, but then it's very strengths based, and how do we move forward? Like I said, it helps to navigate those next steps, but those next steps are always based on the individual that we're working with, their needs and desires. Of course, together, by utilising the principles, we can explore solutions and suggestions, but it's always based on that individual's needs and where they want to get to. And we look through how they can get there, what resources might they need, what obstacles might they be facing as well, and how they can safely navigate them. We promote multiple pathways and resources, so not just within the NGSN, but much wider than that as well. So we have individuals who, have gone on to additional support. So we've looked at things such as career, physical health and well-being, obviously rebuilding confidence, self-esteem, etc. So there's loads of different things. Obviously, finance is a big one, social, improving that social circle as well. Our support service is remote, so it's really easy to access on your laptop, tablet, phone. We do also provide telephone support as well. If someone doesn't have access to a laptop or phone, if someone's working on our Life After Gambling program, we have resources that we can send out in the post, so someone can work on that over the phone if they don't have access to a laptop or phone. And some of the impact that we've seen, which I'm really pleased to share. So we do use evaluation tools. So we do use pre and post course evaluation. And for us, what that looks like is a wellbeing evaluation, which is, if anyone has come across any coaching, it's pretty much just a traditional coaching tool called the Wheel of Life, or Wellbeing Wheel, other words. And it essentially asks someone to evaluate, or a life audit, to evaluate 8 different aspects of everyday life. And that's really helpful because, as I said, coaching is all about bringing awareness to the present. So we ask someone to score out of 10 where they feel they're currently at. And again, through conversation with the coach, it will be like those open questions, such as, I notice you've scored social a 5. Explain a little bit more what that looks like. Obviously, then through the conversation, where would you like that to get to? And then how can we get there? So what does a 6 look like, for example? And then working and setting some goals to achieve that. So we do that at the very start of someone having sessions with us. And then we do that towards the end as well. On one of our programs, so we do offer ad hoc recovery coaching sessions, but we also offer a 10-week program or 10-session program called Life After Gambling program, which looks into different areas of life, looks into different areas of self-awareness as well, such as self-care, mindset, beliefs, values, emotions, and fear and goal setting. So we do our evaluation at the start of someone, at the very start of that program, and then at the very end. We also use the Warwick and Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, which is nationally recognised. It's a section of questions which really asks someone to really explore, their well-being. Different questions, ask them evaluate on a scale of 5 of how they're currently feeling. So we do that again at the very start and at the very end as well. And this data that I'm about to share is up to the end of June. So these are average statistics. So on average, someone going through our piece of work, so Life After Gambling program, has increased their well-being evaluation by 17.2% and has increased their WEMWeb score by 8.3%. And we're really, really proud of those scores, because it really highlights the great work that our coaches have been doing, but it also highlights the impact that individuals are having on their recovery journeys. And some of the things that we're regularly seeing is increased confidence, increased self-esteem, and increased well-being as well. So we're so pleased with those statistics, and that's what we'll continue to deliver as well for people. So that's some of the impact that we've seen. We have also taken part in a piece of research with not solely us, there's other recovery coaching organizations as well, to look at the impact of recovery coaching in the addiction space, not gambling specific, but in the addiction space. And that should be coming out towards the end of this year. So we're really excited to see some of the findings from that, because research is an area that recovery coaching, there's very little out there. You can just find some stuff about recovery in general, nothing for recovery coaching. So we're really pleased that there is some research that we've been able to feed into. So really excited to see that at the end of this year. And finally, before I take some questions, I just wanted to share who does our training basically. So Recovery Coach Academy are a CIC, who the only organisation in the UK who have been licensed to deliver the CCAR qualification. So Recovery Coach Academy run 5 different courses that then make up your Recovery Coach Professional qualification. So the idea is that you gain credits, points for completing those courses, those qualifications, and then you put together a written submission, and you then sit a board panel as well, where you basically interview and talk around your recovery coaching, and puts you in different scenarios to then either you pass, or you're not quite ready to get the Recovery Coach Professional designate. But Reframe Coaching has been working with Recovery Coach Academy since our inception. They deliver our recovery coach training. So we have trained through their 5-day RCA course over 30 individuals with lived experience to become recovery coaches. And pleasingly, of that 30, 15 have gone on to deliver on a freelance basis for the charity, and have done some amazing work for us. So we're so grateful for the training and that people are receiving through RCA. So I wanted to share that just in case anyone was interested in learning a little bit more about the qualification itself, a little bit more about the things that you will cover. If you check out the Recovery Coach Academy, all of their courses will be on there. I'm also happy if anyone is interested to take any sort of questions in a minute, but also offline as well. So if anyone wanted to find out more, we also have, so as well as the recovery coach qualification, we have built our own minimum training standard as an organization. So our minimum training standard is made up of the 5-day Recovery Coach Academy course, but it's also made up of a certificate in safeguarding vulnerable adults and children, and also a certificate in suicide awareness. So those three things make up our minimum training standard. So before anyone does any work with us as a freelance or volunteer, they have to hit that training standard. And we've also been supporting some of our coaches to then look towards their RCP as well. So we currently have half a dozen coaches who are now working towards their RCP designate as well. So really pleased to be able to be supporting individuals to access that. And really, yeah, although we've got our minimum standard, it's really important that some, if they want to or are able to, then start to look at that RCP designate as well. And just thank you everyone for listening this evening. Thank you so much for Glenn for giving me the time to share a little bit more about what recovery coaching is and how Reframe Coaching uses it. There's loads of stuff I probably could have delved a little bit more into about some of our programs, etc. But I wanted to really highlight some of the core principles of actually what is recovery coaching. So hopefully that has helped sort of explain some of that. And hopefully if you weren't aware, you may be a little bit more, you have a little bit more knowledge about what recovery coaching is. But I'm just going to stop sharing. And of course, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them now. I'm also happy to take any emails or questions outside of this session as well.
Yeah. Firstly, Steve, I want to say thanks for coming on and doing that presentation and sharing. Really insightful about obviously what you've been doing, what Reframe do, the support you've been giving the coaches, really, really good. So yeah, I think it's time to probably open up the floor for some questions. I can see Michael's got his hand up, so I'll go over to Michael for a question.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I am Michael Walsh. I'm actually based on Vancouver Island in Canada. I've been doing recovery coaching in Canada since 2014. And Steve, I really appreciated how you presented the material. I do, like yourself, embody the elements of recovery coaching, keeping in our lane, keeping it separate, from therapy. Everything you said, I'm just like, yeah, this is amazing to to see you present and articulate so well. I have a very busy practice in Canada doing not only recovery coaching, a bunch of other stuff, but mostly it is to do with substance use and rarely, I guess, the behavioral aspect, specifically gambling. And the reason that I wanted to come on today was to learn more about the gambling piece, because more and more people have reached out to me and I'm not able to specifically provide a service to them with a recovery coach who also has that lived experience piece. Probably I'm going to reach out to you to get on a separate call if you would. I guess what is my question? I want to know sort of how often people are also utilizing like a therapeutic support with the coaching piece. And like, I don't know a lot about gambling. I'm an expert in substance use, but I don't know sort of like what that clinical piece, and it probably varies person to person. Someone who's an extreme gambler where their life is literally crumbling. I don't know, like, could recovery coaching on its own be enough for that person? Or is there a need for like a psychological assessment that would provide a treatment plan, and maybe they go to, inpatient treatment? And anyways, it's, what is my question? My question is, I guess I want to know, like, how often you folks are working with people like strictly as recovery coaches, and perhaps it varies in their sort of process. And then how often are like clinicians involved, you doing your work and the therapist doing their work. And then yeah, I'm going to reach out to you separately because I just want to know more. And I want to thank you for presenting today. I think it's amazing. If you know of any gambling recovery coaches with like incredible credentials, I guess, in Canada or even in the US, I would love to chat with them. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And we'll definitely catch up outside of here. I'll pop my email address in the chat for everybody. So we'll definitely catch up. In regards to your question, it's a really difficult one to answer. So from Reframe Coaching side, we as a service only offer recovery coaching support. So we don't offer any clinical support. So like you've mentioned about staying in our lane, that is very much our lane. However, we do work with individuals, and it's really difficult because it's a really bespoke service. So some people we'll work with, and they will be at the very start of their journey. I know I mentioned that we had a program and a partnership with a provider where we accept referrals after they've had treatment, but we also accept self-referrals from individuals at a really early stage of their recovery. And I think for us as well, that's one of the benefits of recovery coaching, because we're breaking down barriers of actually, do you know what, for some people it could be quite scary reaching out for that clinical support to start off with. And that shame, stigma, all of that stuff that we've mentioned earlier. So to speak to someone who is a trained professional but is also have their lived experience and they will understand how you're feeling, we've seen for some people that is such a big benefit. So we've had people who have reached out for us at the very start. We obviously explore what their next steps are. Some people want to continue moving forward with recovery coaching. Other people have actually then felt more comfortable to access more clinical services. And at that stage, if someone does want to work or engage with a clinical service, our coach will be explaining what services are available. So it's looking at actually, again, needs based. So do they prefer face to face? Would they prefer remote? Do they want it residential? Do they want sessional work? So there's so many different questions. And from that, it's about them working out together of, right, okay, again, what are your next steps? So, and then once we've found that clinical route, it's about making a professional referral to one of those organizations, and working shoulder to shoulder in that approach. Now, what we always say to individuals is once that referral has been accepted and that then onboarding has happened from a clinical side, we are still able to offer ad hoc recovery coaching support. However, for some people that might not be helpful, that might not be necessary. But again, for some people that actually they still do want that contact. So what we've seen is no hard or fast rule at all. It's really bespoke in terms of how we use it. Some people still have their sessions with us, maybe not as frequent. Other people want to fully engage with the clinical work and not have any coaching alongside it. And then then some have re-engaged at a later date. So I know that doesn't really answer your question, but all I can do is share our experiences of what we've seen. Also, what we've seen when we've had referrals from treatment practitioners. Sometimes when we're working with individuals, we're bringing awareness to the present. People have been in, for example, for treatment with regards to their gambling. When we're bringing awareness to stuff, there might be other things that we're bringing awareness to things that they actually want more additional support with. So we have made referrals to other organizations such as drug detox units, for example, because that was the next step for people. So we do work quite closely with a lot of clinical organizations, but we always, like you've said, remember to stay in our lane. And one thing we'd love to do over the next coming years is build upon that research piece that I've mentioned, and actually looking at the different ways where recovery coaching can support someone. I'm always really mindful of that has to be led by the person seeking support rather than what we believe, because again, that goes against the principles of what recovery coaching is. I feel as though I've just waffled for a little bit, but hopefully that's given you a little bit more of an insight.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you and your journey and where you've arrived at today to be here on this call. So thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
And thanks, Steve, for answering that. So there's some question time if you want, guys. Mark, I think you said you had you wanted some questions or had some questions to ask. If you want to come in.
I do have some questions to ask, but what I'll say is, after we sort of cover a few questions, we do have, and it might be of interest to Michael, we do have a clip from Spencer Hall, who was an individual who's been through recovery coaching training, facilitated by Steve and Reframe. But if you want the little clip we got to play, kind of explains his introduction to recovery coaching. And I think it goes some way to explain that there are different routes in Spencer's case, as you hear from him. He didn't actually have any formal clinical sort of intervention, any treatment. So in effect, coaching, a little bit of a weird way of doing it, but coaching almost became his own self-clinical support. He learned from doing the coaching training more about himself and his addiction than he'd managed to find out alone. So I'll be sharing that in a while. But before I ask any questions of Steve, I think we should give other people the opportunity. If anyone else here has any questions for Steve, please, this is your chance. Right, okay, seemingly not. In that case, Steve, you're out of luck. It's me, I'm afraid. Thank you very much for your talk. It was amazing. I think probably the first place to start is very, I mean, apologies to Michael, but this is very sort of UK or Great Britain centric, which is that the gambling harms sector in the UK and Great Britain is very compartmentalized at the moment. There's an awful lot of uncertainty due to ongoing political and regulatory changes that are in the air, many of which affect the way, if you want, services are funded. And as Steve, as you already mentioned, recovery coaching is not treatment. And I think there's undoubtedly a case that there's a bias at the moment in terms of funding that goes towards clinical treatment as opposed to forms of recovery. I think recovery is still very much, recovery and recovery support is still very much an afterthought within the sector. The priority does seem to be on clinical treatment and provision. So what I think the first question would be is, where are you? I know a lot of organizations, small organizations in the sector have struggled with funding over the last few years, and the uncertainty isn't going away at the moment because of what's happening. But where are Reframe coaching at the moment in terms of partnership and funding? I mean, please don't feel you have to disclose more than you want to do, but just in general, where do you think you are and how positive are you about the future?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, really interesting question. Not one I was expecting to be asked about recovery coaching, but I'll always give an answer. So where Reframe Coaching is we currently have currently 3 or 4 funding opportunities with Gamble Aware, who, you know, when they had their tendering process came out, we bidded either directly or indirectly as a partner. I alluded to our partnership with GamCare, where we are one of 10 aftercare pilot programs, which that runs till the end of next year. But we've also part of the Community Resilience Fund, and we've also part of the Improving Outcomes Fund. So where Reframe Coaching is really around, there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment. But because that is uncertain, you know, there's stuff that we can't control. There's a lot of stuff where we actually can't plan, because there's nothing to plan around. So all we can do is focus on on the funding that we do have, and working with the individuals that need our support to provide the best service available to people. And I know that might sound a little bit cliche and a little bit cheesy, but that's the reality of it. What we don't want to do is get caught up in loads of conversation about stuff that we're not aware that's happening, stuff that we just can't control, we don't know at the moment. And there's loads of that in this space, and it's right that that is talked about, absolutely. But we are a recovery support service. Our lane is providing recovery support. We want to focus on that at the moment. There will become a time, of course, when things do become a lot more clearer, and we as a charity need to move, again, will be relatively quickly, to see if we can have our services commissioned, because we'd love for our services to be part of whatever a future commissioning strategy or gambling harm strategy looks like. I think you're right to talk about recovery support maybe being not as acknowledged as maybe it should do. Maybe there's a little bit more focused on that treatment aspect and that intervention, which in some cases rightly so. However, there's a lot of research in the drug and alcohol space that talks about recovery and actually providing that recovery support, and how important that is and the contribution that that makes then to society and communities. So I think there's some stuff that we can lean into and learn from as well. But in short, yeah, Reframe is just focusing on the delivery that we're contracted to deliver.
Thank you, Steve. I see David's got his hand up. So, David?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, Steve. So I want to know, since you started this, so what the challenges you've had, because you talked there about recovery coaching being a thing and being viable, and I think there's been conversation about how viable it is, does it work? And I think for someone who's obviously a coach working with yourself, I can see the absolute benefits of it. And going through the CCAR training and talking about how important this is. Do you feel, because obviously you look at some of the scores you've had in people's well-being, so do you feel that this is now becoming a serious thing? Well, it is a serious thing, but also where do we go next with that, or where do you go next with that as Reframe of that? Because it clearly shows that there's an impact to people and in a positive way. So do you think that's been justified with what you've done? That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you look, and I've not shared too much about the work that we've done, but if you look year on year about the sessions that we've delivered, they've increased obviously year on year. And I think this year we'll end up probably doing 4 or 5 times more sessions than we done the year before. And I think as an organization, that's the pathway we want to be working towards, about increasing that support for individuals. Ultimately, our aim as a charity is to provide recovery coaching support to individuals when they need it. Now, obviously we need to be commissioned to do that, but that's ultimately where we want to get to. And I think for some people that is obviously day one, but for other people, we need to recognize that recovery coaching support can happen in day 1001. Life might throw its curveball, and to be able to access recovery coaching support, people might not need to then go into treatment. And I think there needs to be a pathway for people to actually, do you know what, I need a little bit more help here. Actually, do you know what, this works really well for me to focus on. So that's where we ultimately want to get to. There's a lot of things obviously that need to happen for us to get there. In terms of, for us as an organization, we're still relatively young, so building infrastructure, building support mechanisms, whilst still supporting and developing our coaches, I think is really important. And as well, raising awareness of recovery coaching. So that's why I'm really pleased to be here with everyone tonight, because it is relatively new in the UK. And one of the challenges that we have is actually we need to talk about recovery coaching and what it is as a means of support and what will people receive. So we need to shout more about it, but also people are seeing the name recovery coaching and people are adopting recovery coaching without actually knowing any of the principles that I've shared. And for us, one of the challenges is maintaining the quality of what recovery coaching is, rather than people just using it because it's a buzzword and then receiving a standard that isn't actually recovery coaching. So I know some of that is out of our control, but that is an area that I think we desperately need to focus on as well.
Thanks, Steve. A couple of hands up against. We've got Brian and then Michael again. Brian, over to you.
Thank you, David. Hi, Steve. A couple of questions. Firstly, you mentioned a lot of the people you help are referred from GamCare. Obviously, if I was someone struggling with my gambling and found Reframe Coaching online and came to you as the first port of call, you've obviously got things in place to support people from day one and signpost them to other pathways of help if needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, short answer is yes. I mentioned GamCare because of our partnership as part of one of the 10 aftercare pilots. I also mentioned the Community Resilience Fund that we have. That allows us to take self-referrals, which obviously we didn't have access to at the start of last year. So we are able to take self-referrals for people. People do reach out via our website and socials. And for some people, that is very much at day one. And I think it's also important to add that the services for anyone who's affected by gambling. So we also have people reach out who have been affected by someone else's gambling as well. And we have coaches whose lived experience is exactly that. So we will always try and assign based on, the most appropriate coach, again, going back to need as well. But yeah, absolutely, we can support at day one. Some people, we're not an abstinence-based support service either. So if people do reach out, it's not like we won't support them at day one if they're still gambling, because we understand, it's that pre-contemplation stage or contemplation stage. It's still difficult. The fact that they've reached out shows that they want to make a change. So part of recovery coaching is working with them on what that change looks like. So we don't say you can only access ours if you're not gambling, because that defeats what recovery support is for us.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And as someone that's actually sat the 8-week mindfulness course with Reframe, which was amazing for me, something I've gone through recently. I just wanted to champion the efficiency and how good that was and how helpful to sit through that and to add another string to my bow of my recovery, with having started out with GA and then wanting to do more with a therapist, and then finding the lived experience community, which obviously then I found Reframe and the mindfulness. So I'm 11 years down the line from my first ever meeting in recovery, and I'm still learning and getting a great deal from all the aspects of recovery. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Brian. Yeah, really good to see you this evening. Thank you for those nice words. I think the one thing I've not touched on is around what we try and do with Reframe Coaching. So recovery coaching will always be our bread and butter, our modality, but we also have recently leaned into other recovery support. So for example, mindfulness. And mindfulness is all about helping individuals bring greater awareness to the present. So it fits really nicely. And we do run regular mindfulness drop-ins, and we have been running the 8-week mindfulness-based living course for individuals if they want to access mindfulness and learn more about it. And we have run a few cohorts now, that is what Brian is talking about. We've also run some other holistic offerings such as EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, and tapping, again, just to try and provide some additional support for individuals alongside recovery coaching support. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Brian. Michael?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so it probably varies week to week, month to month. Well, first of all, I just want to sort of tag on to, in Canada, recovery coaching is probably the last 4 years getting some traction. There's some, 3 very good trainers out there. There's some credentialing happening. There's some supervision as part of the credentialing. There's mentoring. So it's becoming certainly a lot more organized. So I just want to put that out there. I feel like we're getting some traction in terms of not just individuals, but maybe like private enterprise, third-party insurance companies, disability benefit advisors. I work with a number of those people. So, there are people that see the value of recovery coaching and how it can fit into the sort of component of support and care for the client. Anyway, so I am curious to know, and again, this may vary week to week, month to month, but in terms of like a concurrent presentation, being it like a substance use piece and gambling, what's the percentage of sort of those two presentations showing up like in a client? Number one. Number two, would you be able to share like one or two tools that you or any of your recovery coaches might use within a session? I understand it's not directed coaching and all that kind of stuff, but there may be sort of access. You talk about the wheel of life and all that sort of stuff, but as a foundational tool for someone who maybe is not sure if they like what degree of gambling issue they have, is there some type of an assessment tool that you may use non-clinically, of course, but also one other tool that might help them in the process? I'm curious to know. So number one, concurrent substance use and gambling, and number two, could you share one or two tools that you might use or your coaches might use in a session or a series of sessions? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And thank you for sharing the landscape as well, where you are. It's always really interesting to hear, particularly with the recovery coaching aspect as well, to hear how things are going. So thank you for sharing that. First question around sort of substance use. So we as a charity only work with individuals in the gambling harm space. So when we're working with individuals, it will only be if someone actually talks about their substance use. And again, for us as recovery coaching, it's not for us to diagnose that. So what we will do is we regularly, as part of our so our coaches have to screen for risk, and one of the risk screening is around drug and alcohol use. So we do screen for it, and again, because we're a bespoke service, it's only if it comes up for that individual and they talk about it that actually we will talk about next steps. And for some people, there might well be an underlying issue, but that might not be something that comes up in conversation. So it's always really difficult. And because of that, we don't have any, or we don't collect any statistics around concurrent sort of underlying problems. We do record it on our risk screening, we do record it on our session notes, but it's not something that we sort of represent as data as such, just because we only work with individuals in this gambling space. Of course, if we were working with people across the whole addiction space, then that obviously would be slightly different. In terms of tools, when it comes to, and I know you said non-clinical, but what the treatment providers use over here is what's called the PGSI score, the Problem Gambling Severity Index. And what that does is take individual through, I think it's 9 questions, a number of questions, and at the end of that you will get a score based on your gambling. Obviously the higher the score, the more at risk you are, and might show that you're suffering from problematic gambling. It's not something that we always use as a service, to be honest, especially if we're receiving referrals from a treatment provider. And the reason why we don't do that is a lot of the work that we do, particularly at that maintenance phase of someone's recovery, is about life after gambling. So we a lot of the conversation, actually we don't talk about gambling, we talk about other stuff that's coming up, whether that's well-being, whether that's day-to-day career stuff. But the PGSI score is widely used in the gambling space, so that would be something when it comes to screening. For example, there are other screening questionnaires that certain organizations do use, but I would probably say if you wanted to look up one, the PGSI score would be one. In terms of coaches and techniques, and obviously I've talked about our principles, which pretty much embody all of our work. Our coaches will follow it's really a straightforward sort of template that we use in terms of session planning. So it really is at the very start talking about, you know, the outcome of what that person wants to achieve during the session. And we do have, like I say, some structured programs. So our Life After Gambling program does have some modules within it. And I'm happy to share that with you as well, Michael. So we do have an online recovery platform where that houses videos, it houses resources for individuals who maybe want to self-study without they not feel comfortable talking to someone. They want to self-study on that program. That's cool. But also if they want to work alongside the coach, it gives them an opportunity to either work through resources, discuss the topic. So for example, on our first module, it's about self-care. And on that self-care module, we talk about boundaries, what are the different types of boundaries. And again, not just gambling, but not every boundary. We talk about urge surfing. And we also have resources such as how to create a self-care plan. So they're downloadable resources. And in some sessions, the idea is that that topic gets discussed, and it might be that the coach and the person they're working with goes through that template and that self-care plan. If they want to develop a self-care plan, they go through that with the coach. And we have that in other modules as well. So we have, for example, our beliefs module is all about learning about where beliefs come from, identifying the different types of beliefs. We then look at limiting beliefs, and again, bringing awareness to that for the individual. Again, if someone wants to explore that of how can I safely identify a belief, again, we've got resources that we can support with. Again, it's a conversation that you can have with the coach. And then if I do identify a limiting belief, how can I safely challenge it? So again, we have resources to help and support people to do that. So I can share those resources with you, and I can, you can have access to our online recovery platform, so you can go and see some of the content that we use. That's no problem. But in a stereotypical coaching conversation, it's very much around, right, what outcomes do we want to achieve during this session? And then it's about, right, what resources do you need? What support do you need to achieve that? What obstacles are in your way? And really working together on, right, okay, well, now we've identified that solution or suggestion, what is the way forward? What are the next steps? And then sort of setting the goals, maybe in between sessions, what is going to be achieved by both the coach and also the person they're working with. So a coach might say, I've got some resources that will support in that. I'm going to send them to you after the session. So again, it's working together in that shoulder to shoulder approach to support someone on that recovery journey.
Yeah.
And I've forgotten the third question.
I don't think there was one. I think there was just two.
Okay.
But I do have a couple follow-up.
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you for your patience with my questions, but I want to gather some information. So the online recovery platform, Life After Gambling, is that only for UK clients, or can other people access it or not? And also, if I personally, I have never had a gambling problem, but would I benefit from taking the training? I'm not sure if I would work with a client, because I'm not sure if that would be kind of out of my, my scope of knowledge and all that kind of stuff. But so can anyone access Life After Gambling if I had a client said, hey, listen, there's this resource? And then also, would I take the training even though I don't have gambling lived experience? Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, we only at this moment in time work with people in Great Britain. However, we are having conversations about being able to support people wider, particularly with the remote support services that we have, such as our online recovery platform. So at the moment but like I say, you've got my email, let's stay in touch. I can definitely share some of the resources that we use with you in terms of like that onward referral to that. Again, let's pick that up at a later date. But yeah, at the moment we can't do that. And then in terms of the recovery coaching support and the training, so the training that all of our coaches go on isn't gambling specific around recovery coaching. So they access the support through the Recovery Coach Academy and will be joined by individuals who have lived experience across different addictions, but they'll also be joined by individuals who work as maybe allies in the system, cheerleaders, people who have maybe been affected by a loved one's addiction. And all of the principles of what I've shared this evening is stuff that you would learn on that course. So I just think it's a really powerful course to go on if you're looking to support people in general. Like I mentioned, we've supported over 30 people now. Half of those are working in one shape or form, like freelancing for us. But some of the others who are not have gone on and are working in this space, doing some amazing stuff. And I just hope, and I would have thought the support that they've had through that training would really help them in some of the stuff that they're currently doing now. So yeah, you don't have to have had that gambling lived experience as such to do that training.
Okay, great. I have done the CCAR equivalent training in Canada. There's a company that sort of, uses their template and then added several hours. It's a 5-day program like yours. It's in person. So yeah, I've done some multiple decent recovery coach training. So thank you so much for answering my questions.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Steve. I'm conscious of time, so there's just a couple of things we want to quickly get in before we finish. It may be of interest, Michael. I'm not sure, but Steve touched upon the PGSI sort of gambling screens. We are kind of of the opinion here that there are various gambling screens that are out there, but the purpose of them tends to be in identifying the presence of gambling harm rather than I'm not sure they have that much use in terms of recovery. It's kind of like just a flag up that somebody needs to delve deeper into potential harmful behavior. They tend to focus on things like money, time, etc. And perhaps the biggest harm that comes from gambling isn't financial, surprisingly, but it's to do with trust and relationships, which is why I think it's really interesting. I mean, if there'd been more time, I think I would have put Steve on the spot there by asking him about how important it's been to himself and to his relationship that he and Rochelle have managed to work together in this sort of post-recovery space, talking about subjects which would be very raw for many couples. I'm also very glad to hear that the perspective of somebody who's infected others, for instance Rochelle, that the recognition is there that there needs to be there's recovery need for people who have been exposed to collateral harm from loved ones and partners. But as I mentioned earlier, we're very lucky in Glen in that and we're very grateful to Steve and Reframe that within our core development team, we have sort of several people who have been on the recovery coaching. And one of them, Spencer was wanting to be here, but can't be because he's doing certification tonight. So what I do have is I've got a very brief 2-minute sort of clip from a session we had that Spencer ran on our behalf last week, which touches upon his entry into discovery of recovery coaching, and also, if you want, also highlights, if you want, the fact that from his perspective, he had multiple sort of co-addictions, and he didn't access formal treatment. So in effect, it wasn't a referral pathway. So his access to coaching came about through, I think, what Steve was talking about there, the ability of the Resilience Fund to allow them to have sort of self-directed approaches. So if you bear with me just a second, I'll bring up this little clip here. Did you reach out for professional support at some point?
Yes, I did. About 2.5 years ago, I tried just about every counselling service I could lay my hands on through the NHS and stuff like that. And I had a couple of evaluations with 2 of them, forget what they're called off the top of my head. And I was considered not a risk. even though I shared my suicidal thoughts and the drinking and drugs that I was taking at the time. They got back to me and said that I wasn't, I don't know, not suitable or not high enough risk is what I was told by one of them, which led me to a conversation with Steve Girling from Reframe, who I just found online, and I sent him an email. And from that email, we had a couple of conversations, and Steve kindly put me in touch with the RCA, the Recovery Coach Academy. And what I found for me, and the counselling course that I did at Bournemouth and Paul College, was really it was counselling, you know, for me, because I began to understand the problems. And I think that when you start, you know, because I didn't know what was happening to me, you know, I was melting down. And by understanding some of the issues that I was going through, helped me immensely. You know, it's still not perfect. I still have bad days. But that's really, yeah, so the answer is no, I couldn't get any because I didn't have the money to pay for it privately. They were all full up. Yeah, so that's what I did. And then obviously getting involved with people at Reframe that put me onto the Recovery Coach Academy. That's when I started to learn a lot more about, you know, certain issues and ways to go about managing stuff, basically. And so, no, I've never had any other professional influence, really. It's all been a sort of a self-taught journey, really. Yeah.
All right. Perhaps apologies for the mix up at the start. But before we go, we also have David, our own sort of my sort of partner in crime here at Glen, is also somebody who has done the Reframe coaching and does actively deliver coaching as well on behalf of Reframe. So I think to end off, it might be quite a nice idea to have David give some of his thoughts on his experience of recovery coaching, what he's learned from it, and what benefits he thinks it's delivering to him and to the individuals who he is everyone helping to support for it. So, David.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mark. And yeah, I think for me, I mean, just hearing Spencer talk there, I remember what it was like trying to reach out from the start and get support from doctors and so on, and not getting anywhere. And then I actually did have my own clinical sort of support from Beacon when I stopped gambling, and that was great. It was obviously someone trained. It was someone who I could speak to. But when I came out of that, there was definitely a gap. I think Steve mentioned earlier about what happens next. Where do we go? How do I put my life back together to some degree? Because as soon as I stopped gambling, there was all these elements of, well, now I've stopped gambling, what do I do with my time? And actually, I've got all this debt, and how do I kind of do the things I did before gambling took over? So I decided that I straight away wanted to sort of help other people. So I initially went to GamCare as an ambassador. I then became part of Glen in the development panel, original development panel years ago. And just to hear someone talking about their own lived experience made me straight away feel like actually I'm not on my own because someone else has talked about it. And actually that stigma that we've talked about, that not wanting to come forward, all of a sudden I didn't feel like I was on my own. So that gave me confidence. And then I started speaking to somebody who was already coaching with Steve. And I got in touch with Steve and just said, well, actually, I don't want to be a coach. I want to help other people because actually I think there's something in lived experience and having that connection, but also then trying to help them to navigate their life back. Because if I felt like that, then others must feel the same. Other people will be going through that loss, and where do we go next? So again, I can't fault the training. The training was unbelievable. And yeah, just to answer your question a little bit, so you said, Michael, I had comorbidities as well. I was drinking heavy, so I think that's definitely in there. When I did the RCA training, a lot of people that I was working with on the courses were people who were supporting people through alcohol and drug addiction. There was probably about a couple of people who were sort of doing gambling. But what I found was there was so many overlaps with what we were trying to do and the recovery and what we're trying to put in place to help people. So it definitely covers all those aspects. I think for me, I mean, when I first started doing it, I was nervous because obviously this is someone coming to get support from a addiction that's devastating for them, that's potentially took everything from them. So I worked to make sure that I was in the right place to support them, because that was a little nervous for me at first. But straight away, when that person comes on the phone, they tell you, and the first thing I used to do was just say to them, well, the first thing is thank you just for being here in the first place and taking that step just to actually talk about it with someone, because that's massive in itself. And as Steve mentioned, I sometimes may give my own story just if it helps them sort of resonate with what I'm going through. But and a couple of people were great about that. I said, well, actually, you're the first person I spoke to now actually has been through that, and I don't feel like I'm on my own. But very much what I wanted to do was not tell people what to do. And there's that kind of mindset for me about I want to give them solutions. I want to tell them this is the right thing. But with recovery, it's also different. There's so many different paths to recovery. So what I found myself doing was like what Steve said, is just sort of asking them what they want to get from the sessions. It was about them. And asked them what it is they wanted to get from the sessions, what they wanted to talk about, what were the obstacles, what were the challenges, what were the things in their life currently that actually were giving them the biggest problems, the biggest obstacles, the thing that they feared the most. And again, some of that came from the pre-evaluation forms that we filled out, and we could highlight that and then just talk about what it is that they felt they wanted to do. But it was different pathways. It wasn't me telling them what to do. It was just me sort of speaking and listening to them and asking them what it is that they felt they wanted to do. Was it self-care? Was it parts in their life where they don't go out anymore, they don't go to the gym, they don't see people, and how they sort of want to get around that, how you want to work that. And that was really powerful in itself. And there is a course and there is materials that you can share with them. And sometimes I find that some people want to go through that material, other people want to do it alone. But the purpose of it was just to sort of highlight every single week and recap on what we did the week before. How did that go? Checking in with them. Did you do that? Right? Why not? Let's look at how we can get you to that point. So for me, it wasn't about ignoring something. And if something hadn't still been resolved, I wanted to make sure that they had that we talked about that and that we could try and find solutions for that for them. Because I didn't want any part of their life that they've told me about this problem to be ignored. And so, it was always about going back to what we spoke about previously, looking at what's the next step for them, and just having that kind of understanding. So for me as well, I know Spencer spoke about it, that feels like therapy for me as well. So when I'm talking to people and they're opening up and they're talking about the things that are challenging them, and it can be sometimes not easy because you can have people who are very quiet or might not say much at first. So it is about that kind of listening and just giving that bit of time. If there's an uncomfortable silence, that's okay. Just let them talk about what they want to talk about. So I found the whole experience amazing, and I love it. And I get so much from just people turning back up again and wanting to talk about more about what they did. And actually, I've tried that now, and actually that was brilliant. And let's move on to the next thing. So I think it's great. And yeah, and I want to obviously Steve's been pivotal in my own development as well, in me going forward to be to do the recovery coaching practitioner designate, which is something that he's supporting me with. So I think it's been brilliant, and I would advocate it to everybody. So I hope that gives a bit of a picture of what's going on. So yeah.
Thank you, David. I'm conscious of time. We're just about out of time. So first of all, I'd like to once again thank you, Steve, for coming along and telling us about the Reframe coaching and recovery coaching itself. We will be taking what we have here, the record of it, and thank you, David, for starting the recording, as ever I forgot. And we'll be editing it, mostly to take out my parts, I can assure you. And once we've done that, we will upload it to our YouTube channel. And everyone who's signed up who's been attending tonight and signed up for tonight, we'll send out an email once that's up with the link so they can view it again afterwards. But before we go, I would just throw for the last minute to throw the mics open to anybody who has any follow-up questions or any comments they want to say just before we say adieu and bid farewell.
No good. Michael.
I just want to thank you for putting this together. I really appreciate you allowing me to come in from Canada. Really, yeah, it was wonderful. So thank you so much. I look forward to staying in touch. And David, thank you for sharing what you did.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Max, for coming on from Canada.
Appreciate it.
All places as well.
Thank
Brilliant.
You.
Good to have you on board. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Right then, I guess that's a wrap then. Well, yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you all in the future. And as I say, we'll be in touch as soon as we have the the highlights, edited highlights ready there. Don't worry, Steve, you look fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Looking good, Steve, as usual.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thanks
for coming,
everybody.
Steve.
Really good
Thanks,
to
guys.
see you.